The anime begins with the protagonist wielding a sword in an epic manner before facing a group of goblins. He defeats them easily thanks to his great power and speed. The scene changes, and we see a man traveling by carriage being chased by goblins from the forest. Just when he's in serious trouble, a group of warriors suddenly appears and saves him by killing the beasts. Meanwhile, we move to the city where we see our protagonist, who is extremely hungry. He suddenly sees the same group of warriors arriving, the ones who saved the man in the carriage. They look very happy because they leveled up and also got a good amount of loot. Our main character, hearing them talk about defeating goblins, laments that he'll never be able to do something like that, as he's just a useless guy whose stomach won't stop growling, all because of his absurd ability called gluttony. Later, we see the warriors from before buying new weapons with the loot they earned, but then the Holy Knights arrive, a group made up of the 3 Verics brothers. Then we see a man being struck by Sir Hado for supposedly offending him. Memel steps in and reminds the man that the punishment for offending a Holy Knight is death. However, the 3rd member of the group asks them to stop harassing the man and tells him not to let it happen again. As they leave, the hidden group of warriors laments that Lady Roxy is part of the Holy Knights. Back to our protagonist, who is at the castle gate, telling himself to endure the hunger since his shift is almost over. Suddenly, Raphael, one of the Holy Knights, asks if he fulfilled his duty of covering their shift today. Fate replies yes, and Raphael throws his payment on the ground, forcing him to kneel to pick it up. But as Fate bends down, he falls into the Holy Knight's trap. Hado approaches and grabs his hand, keeping him on his knees to humiliate him. Raphael mocks the sound of his growling stomach, acting as if Fate isn't even fed. Hado, annoyed, accuses him of trying to shame the Verics family and punches him. While Fate is being beaten, he tells us that in this world there are privileged and needy people, and the only thing that distinguishes them are the God-given special powers called skills. The knights scold him for slacking off, saying he makes them look bad. When Fate tries to stand up, Hado punches him again to keep him down. Raphael declares that rebels need to be taught a lesson with a heavy hand. But as they're abusing Fate, Roxy Hart arrives to stop them, saying that abusing the citizens they swore to protect is not how a holy knight should act. She tells them that guarding the gate is an honorable duty for a knight, so they should do it themselves. Raphael counters, saying it's also their duty to offer work to the needy. Roxy questions whether they need to treat Fate that way, but Raphael just says they have different points of view and tells the others to leave. After they go, Roxy offers Fate her hand to help him up. He thanks her, and she says she did it because they're gate duty partners. Roxy confesses that this is how knights should behave and tells him she's relieving him from his shift. Fate quickly hands over the tools, and before leaving, Roxy tells him that if he's ever bothered again, he should let her know. But Fate replies that there's no need, he's used to it, which leaves Roxy speechless. That night, while having dinner, Fate reflects on Roxy's words. He worries about Raphael's reaction since he has a bad temper and doesn't want to get her involved. The bartender notices his bruises and warns him he might end up like the last guy, abused and worked to death. But he also admits he hopes that doesn't happen. Later, Fate walks through the city, his stomach still growling from hunger due to his gluttony skill. He wishes he had a more useful skill and that even if he weren't a knight, he could have at least been a warrior, merchant, or craftsman. But he resigns himself to the fact that in this world, if you have nothing, you get stepped on. Suddenly, he sees thieves sneaking around the city and decides to inform Lady Roxy. When he finds her and tells her what he saw, she asks him to cover her while she takes care of them. Soon, Fate sees a thief coming back through the gate, missing an arm. Though tempted to run, he remembers that Roxy left him in charge, so he stands his ground. Fate charges with a spear and kills the thief instantly. This triggers his gluttony skill, and all his attributes increase. He also gains 2 new skills, appraisal and telepathy. But looking at the thief's body, Fate doesn't understand how gluttony was activated. Soon after, Roxy returns, worried about Fate. He suddenly realizes he can hear her thoughts thanks to telepathy. She says she must report what happened, but when she does, Fate stops hearing her thoughts. He tells her he understands and suggests she take the credit. Roxy refuses, saying he was the one who defeated the thief. Fate worries about Raphael finding out, but Roxy thanks him for helping her fulfill her duties. She offers him a job with the Hart family as a reward. Fate is shocked, and she asks if he really wants to serve the Verics family until they kill him. She reminds him that it's his choice to decide his future. Fate thinks about it, worrying that if he quits, his replacement might suffer. But Roxy insists it's not his responsibility, and Fate, trusting her words, accepts the offer with honor. Back at home, Fate checks his stats and sees all his attributes are now over 100. He wonders what happened and concludes telepathy allowed him to hear Roxy's thoughts. Suddenly, gluttony activates again, changing his body. Fate thinks maybe now he's strong enough to kill monsters. The next day, he goes to the market in search of a weapon. But with only a few coins, the shopkeeper calls him poor. Frustrated, Fate explains he's been working for 5 years and saved only this. Feeling sorry, the shopkeeper offers him old weapons from the trash bin. Using appraisal, Fate checks the stats of each sword. One badly worn sword catches his attention. It looks as battered as he feels. Suddenly, the sword speaks to him, saying it will make everything worthwhile. Knowing he has the gluttony skill, the sword asks him to buy it, saying they have much in common. Later, Fate walks through town with the talking sword. Meanwhile, the Verics brothers talk about Roxy wanting to hire Fate. Mimel tells Rafal they should teach her what happens when you oppose the Verics. Rafal, however, says Fate isn't worth it. They have plenty of substitutes. Mimel is annoyed that Roxy also criticized their guarding methods. She reminds him that both families are among the kingdom's 5 great houses. Rafal says they shouldn't overcomplicate things and mentions he's heading to the military district. Mimel asks why he's always so eager to go there. Rafal says it's because of his research into immortality, making Mimel laugh, thinking he's joking. Back to Fate, walking with his sword, which says it has learned his name. Suddenly, a goblin attacks, and the sword warns Fate of incoming enemies. Fate defeats the goblin, activating gluttony again and gaining a new skill, Power Boost. He then realizes he's surrounded by more goblins and slaughters them with his new sword. His gluttony skill activates repeatedly, and when he checks his stats again, he sees another new skill, Endurance Boost, with some attributes now over 1,000. The sword asks if he's still hungry. Fate is surprised that, for the first time, his stomach is silent. He asks the sword, named Greed, about these new abilities, thinking they're assigned at birth. Greed explains that with gluttony, Fate can steal stats and skills, but in return, he doesn't gain experience points or levels. This explains why he's still level 1 despite everything. Fate asks how the sword knows so much. Greed says it's because they're in the same situation and warns him not to reveal this ability, as it defies the divine laws. This leaves Fate speechless. He realizes he'll have to fight alone, but the sword reminds him they're together now. Fate is happy and decides it's time to go home. Before leaving, Greed advises him to take the goblin ears for money. Later, we see that Fate earns 3 silver coins and 8 bronze for the 38 goblins he defeated. He plans to eat meat for the first time in 5 years, but the sword insists on maintenance first. As Fate walks, distracted, he bumps into a man with a young girl. When she touches him, his telepathy skill activates and he hears she needs help. He uses appraisal and discovers the man has the camouflage skill, which even hides his skills from Fate. Although he doesn't fully understand what the man is planning, he decides he must act. Meanwhile, the man tells the girl she'll be a plaything for the Holy Knights, making her cry. Fate watches and prepares to intervene. We now move to a religious school where the nun in charge of a group of children tells them the story of the origin. She explains that they were all created by Laplace, who, before leaving the world, gifted them with special powers. Then she asks the children if they know what those powers are called, to which they respond, skills. Because they answered correctly, she asks them to give thanks to Laplace for the food they are about to receive. During the meal, all the children enjoy their food, except for one. The nun approaches him. He tells her that Laplace is unfair because holy knights and warriors have amazing skills. However, he ended up with a weak one and believes that's why he was abandoned. When she hears this, the nun explains that back when Laplace still protected the world, there were neither skills nor monsters. So, during that time, everyone was equal. Hearing that, the boy, crying, confesses he wishes he had been born in that era. While he cries, the nun comforts him until they're interrupted by another woman who informs her they still haven't found Sahara. The scene shifts, and we see the man who kidnapped the girl mocking her and telling her to stop making noise. But seeing that his job will take time, he decides to leave for a bit. That's when the protagonist takes the opportunity to rescue the girl, who calms down upon seeing him. But suddenly, her expression changes when they are discovered by the kidnapper. The man tells the main character that sometimes he encounters idiots like him who are led by a false sense of justice. Hearing that, Fate prepares to fight, and his enemy asks if he can fight while protecting the girl. Fate considers that his priority is to get the girl to safety and wonders where he can take her. Suddenly, Greed interrupts and tells him to step back. He notices that the enemy is underestimating Fate and wants to take advantage of his confidence. Fate follows the advice and starts running to hide from the man. His pursuer, chasing with his sword, threatens that if he breaks any crates, he'll bury him before the girl. However, the protagonist distracts him by knocking down some crates and then lunges at him. The battle begins, and the kidnapper reveals a skill called Leaf Cutter. Greed advises Fate to try to pierce his opponent's sword during the attack. Fate follows the suggestion and manages to destroy the enemy's weapon. Before finishing him off, he tries to interrogate him about who ordered the kidnapping. As the man refuses to talk, Fate tortures him. He finally reveals that it was Hado who sent him. When Fate heard the name, remembers how Hado used to torture him as a child. Later, he rescues the girl, and when they are about to leave, both are hungry. Fate suggests they get something to eat and asks her name. The girl replies her name is Sahara, and they head off in search of food. In the next scene, Fate and Sahara enjoy some meat they bought in town. Sahara is so moved by the taste, since she had never eaten it before, that she cries with joy. Seeing this, Fate offers her his own skewer so she can enjoy it more. After eating, Fate takes the girl back to the orphanage, where one of the nuns was waiting for her. Sahara, now safe, thanks Fate by calling him brother, which surprises him because no one had ever thanked him before. He tells her his skill is not useful, which surprises Sahara, especially when she finds out his skill is hunger. Fate tells her that no matter how hard things get, if she overcomes them, she will find happiness. He remembers that his father once told him the same thing, and it helped him keep going. So he wants to pass that message on to her as well. Fate then checks his stats and discovers he's acquired new abilities. He now has the camouflage skill and the one-handed sword technique. Greed congratulates him for getting his first technical skill, which will allow him to learn secret techniques. This particular one lets him strike twice with a single slash. Fate realizes that if he had been hit by Leaf Cutter, he might have died. He scolds Greed for not warning him, and Greed responds that he was too busy playing the hero. Fate says he's no hero and wouldn't have risked himself if he had known. As they head home, Greed tells him battles often come down to luck since the strongest doesn't always win. Hearing this, Fate decides he must become stronger to stop depending on luck. Then Greed reminds him that he starts working for the Hart family tomorrow and asks if he plans to go dressed like that. Fate panics, realizing he forgot to buy new clothes. In the next scene, a man tells the bartender that a celestial dragon killed Sir Mason Hart in Galia. Now, Roxy is the heir to the family, and the man wonders how she'll manage to keep the Holy Knights in line. The bartender changes the subject and brings up the protagonist, noting he doesn't show up after work, like before. The next day, Fate arrives in new clothes and is amazed by the size of the Holy Knights district. While he's in awe of the houses, Lady Roxy approaches. She had been waiting for him. Roxy asks what's wrong, and Fate says she looks so beautiful that he was left speechless. She blushes and says he should also dress up from time to time. She then compliments his appearance as well. The scene changes. Roxy takes Fate to her father's grave to introduce him. Talking to her father, she says she's confident Fate will help bring peace back to the mansion. Fate asks what happened to him, and Roxy explains he died because of a celestial dragon in Galia. Our main character tells us that Galia is a monster-dominated continent. That's why one of the duties of Holy Knights is to keep them in check. Roxy says it was her family's turn to go this year, and although it's dangerous, deaths are rare. However, a celestial dragon that had been dormant for 1,000 years suddenly emerged. As a result, her father's squad was wiped out. Fate feels sorry and becomes angry, realizing she's still worried about him despite her own loss. Sensing his frustration, Roxy tells him not to worry, as she is now the head of the Hart household. She promises to bring happiness to their home and asks for his help. Fate agrees, saying it would be an honor. She reaches out her hand to seal the promise, but before he can shake it, he hesitates. If he touches her, he might sense her thoughts. As he's thinking of a way to escape the situation, they're interrupted by a maid named Haru. Fate introduces himself, and Haru, staring at him, tells him to behave like a proper Hart servant. Later, we see Fate eating meat and enjoying it since he hadn't had any in a long time. This draws the attention of the other servants, who are amazed. In the next scene, Fate is trimming plants, and the other servants tell him to rest. He replies to Oliver that he'll rest as soon as he finishes. Oliver and Minerva ask him not to overwork himself since it's only his first week. Minerva confesses that at first she thought he was a weirdo for talking to his sword. Oliver adds that he also went wild after eating meat, making Fate embarrassed. Fate admits he hadn't eaten it in 5 years and asks for understanding. While they laugh, they hear Fate's stomach growling and are surprised he's still hungry after eating. Fate awkwardly says he's still growing. Suddenly, Haru approaches and tells him Lady Roxy wants to see him. Fate arrives and shares tea with Roxy. She asks if he's gotten used to working there. He doesn't reply. He's too focused on how hungry he feels. She has to call his name several times before getting his attention. Hearing her call him Faye, he remembers his father and apologizes, saying that's what his father used to call him. Fate tells her his father was killed by a monster, to which Roxy replies that hers suffered the same fate. He then asks why she calls him Faye, and she says it's an affectionate nickname. She also says he's now part of her family, which makes Fate blush and ask her to just call him Fate. She refuses, and suddenly notices he's not feeling well. The scene shifts. Fate wakes up in his room and finds a letter from Roxy. In it, she tells him to take the day off and get some rest. Fate asks his sword what's happening. Greed tells him it's too late to ask. Once gluttony tastes a soul, there's no turning back. The more he devours, the stronger he becomes, which increases his hunger. So now, his fate is to keep consuming souls or die. Fate asks what happens if he doesn't, and Greed says he'll either die or lose control and attack anyone nearby. Realizing this, Fate fears becoming a monster. Greed tells him his eyes now reflect extreme hunger. Fate looks in the mirror and sees his eyes are red. Later, Fate heads in disguise to join the warriors preparing to hunt monsters. He confesses to his sword that the others look appetizing, a sign that hunger impulse has activated. This explains his red eyes and allows him to use his gluttony skill more effectively. Greed says he now has night vision, can track prey by scent, and paralyze weaker enemies. Fate paralyzes and slaughters many goblins, but consuming them isn't enough, so Greed suggests heading to the goblin forest. There, he finds stronger enemies that aren't paralyzed by him. Even after killing them, his hunger isn't satisfied. Eventually, after killing a large number, he finally feels full. Fate tells Greed he never wants to feel that way again. Greed suggests hunting monsters regularly to feed gluttony with souls. As he's about to leave, he encounters the Goblin King, whose skill is regeneration. Greed explains what it does, and Fate decides he wants that ability. He follows the king and finds him eating a human, which disgusts him. Still, he attacks while the goblin is distracted and cuts off its hand. The Goblin King, enraged, launches multiple attacks in retaliation. Fate dodges them all until Greed tells him to stop dodging and fight. Fate charges and manages to defeat the Goblin King, stealing his skill. Afterward, Greed says he can change forms when leveling up, but it will cost attribute points as an offering. He also mentions he can unlock new functions. Fate asks how many points it would cost, and Greed replies, all of them, everything earned since they met. Fate refuses, so Greed threatens to no longer let him wield him. He asks if Fate wants to grow strong alone or become stronger together. Fate says it's not a hard choice and agrees. Greed promises he won't regret it. Finally, Greed transforms into a magic bow and suggests they practice on a goblin spying on them. Fate agrees, but first asks where to get arrows from. Greed says to just pull the bowstring and arrows will appear. Fate does so and finds the arrows home in on their targets, which is incredible. Later, after the hunt, he takes goblin ears to Sahara's orphanage so they can buy food. The next day, the protagonist mistakes Lady Roxy for a stranger, and when he notifies her of her presence, he scares her. He apologizes for not recognizing her and asks if she's heading to the castle dressed like that, but she gets annoyed and admits that now that he's seen her, she'll explain what's going on. Roxy approaches and whispers in his ear that she's going into town on a secret inspection, so he mustn't tell anyone he saw her. If Haru finds out, she'll scold her for not dressing properly as the head of the Hart family. So Fate apologizes for interrupting her mission and says he'll continue with his work. However, she stops him and informs him that she's assigned him the secret mission of being her escort during the inspection. They finally arrive in town, and the protagonist sees Roxy enjoying walking through it. But when she hears Fate still calling her by her real name, she scolds him, warning they'll be discovered. So she asks him to call her Roki from now on, to which the protagonist replies, "Shut up." She apologizes, seeing that the protagonist is upset, and when she realizes this, Fate apologizes too, saying he wasn't speaking to her. However, Roxy confesses she's very excited about the mission, which makes both of them blush. Suddenly, Avarice laughs at the protagonist, and he decides to scold him directly. Seeing this, Roxy asks Fate not to wield his sword so recklessly and stops him. Then she notices she's never really seen his sword closely, and it catches her attention. Our main character thinks it's odd that someone without a useful skill would carry one. He then remembers Avarice's words and realizes he mustn't let Roxy discover his ability. But distracted by this, he drops Avarice and Roxy catches the sword before it falls. She asks the protagonist to show her the sword, and upon inspecting it, she tells Fate it needs maintenance. So she offers to introduce him to the Hart family's blacksmith, but tells him to continue with the mission for now. They then arrive at the market, where some grapes catch Roxy's attention. She approaches the fruit stand, and the vendor tells her they're grapes from the Hart family's vineyard. Roxy smiles at the coincidence and asks if she can have one. The vendor, unable to refuse, gives her two, and she decides to share one with Fate. When he tastes it, he's amazed by the flavor, which delights Roxy, who proudly reveals they're from her vineyard, exposing her identity. So Fate tells the vendor that the girl's family works for the Harts. Because the vendor believes him, both feel relieved for keeping her identity hidden. Suddenly, they're interrupted by an announcement. The Holy Knights are approaching. This causes everyone to look at them with suspicion, as ever since Roxy's father died, the Knights have become unbearable. As the knight approaches, the sound of Fate's stomach growling draws his attention. Fate tries to apologize, but the knight, flaunting his authority, decides to humiliate him. Just as he's about to strike the protagonist, Lady Roxy intervenes and stops him. This makes people start suspecting Roxy's identity. Avarice suggests to the protagonist that he pretend to be Roxy's lover to draw suspicion away. Fate, shocked by the idea, repeats it aloud, causing Roxy to hear. She thinks it's a good idea, so she grabs his arm and pretends they're a couple. She then apologizes to the knight and promises it won't happen again. They manage to divert attention and escape into a hidden alley. While there, Fate hears Roxy's thoughts because he's still holding her arm. Hearing her thoughts makes Fate nervous, and he quickly pulls away. Roxy lies and says he doesn't need to worry, as she's used to situations like this. In the next scene, the protagonist approaches Roxy, who is looking at a gem that caught her attention. Then she sees some mineral rocks, and the vendor explains they won't know which gem is inside until opened. He invites them to try their luck. It only costs 10 bronze coins. Avarice tells the protagonist he can use his evaluation skill to find a winning rock, but warns him to be careful since vendors hate people who use that ability. Roxy, meanwhile, is holding a blue gem that excites her because of how pretty it is. Our main character thinks she seems more like a normal girl than a holy knight. The vendor offers the protagonist a discount so he can buy a gift for his girl, but she puts the gem back and thanks the vendor for the discount, saying she's decided not to take it. Roxy then asks if he knows any warriors. Fate replies that Oliver and Minerva were warriors, and she says she needs to ask active ones something. While Fate tries to figure out what she needs, they hear people talking about dead goblins. Rumors say they were killed by a wandering monster, which shocks the protagonist. Roxy suddenly rushes off to spy on the people talking. They mention that the orphanage nuns are investigating who donated so many goblin ears. Roxy interrupts and asks for more information about the wandering monster. They refuse to say more and suggest she ask the warriors. So she asks Fate to take her to where the warriors gather. She wants to investigate the rumored wandering monster that appeared in the capital. The protagonist is shocked because they're talking about him. The scene shifts to a tavern where the bartender tells the protagonist he can't sit there. That spot belonged to someone who died, but he's shocked and happy to see Fate alive. Fate takes his seat and introduces Roki as his co-worker. The bartender welcomes them and scolds the protagonist for taking so long to show up. He then jokes that he also returned with a girlfriend, making the protagonist flustered and embarrassed, so much so that they break their cups. Later, the bartender tells them about a warrior who got rich from goblin remains. He went out hunting and found a mountain of corpses with their ears still intact. This catches Roxy's attention. She thinks if a warrior had killed them, he would have taken the loot. So maybe it was a wandering monster that migrated from another region. The bartender thinks that would be bad for business. To trade or buy, people must cross the goblin plains to reach the capital. If there's a mysterious creature around, no one will travel. Fate feels sad because all of this is his fault. Suddenly, Mr. Ad appears and, upon seeing Fate, thinks he's a ghost. But after learning the truth, he sits and chats with everyone. Ad confesses he thinks a lich is behind what's happening. He reveals that due to the danger, the Holy Knights will take action. Roxy is surprised and he assures her it's true, a warrior friend told him. Avarice thinks the protagonist will easily defeat the Holy Knights if needed. But what really worries Fate is Roxy, and then asks why they're so interested in the wandering monster, which makes Roxy nervous. Suddenly, rogue warriors arrive and start harassing Roxy. The protagonist tries to defend her, but she quickly takes down one of them herself. Roxy is forced to reveal her identity to everyone. Everyone is shocked to see her there, and the warriors beg for forgiveness and offer money, which Roxy rejects. She says she's ashamed that people who once vowed to protect now inspire fear. Holy Knights should protect the people and the world, so everyone can laugh together. Roxy says she shares that dream with her father, and everyone is moved. Fate thinks that until her dream comes true, he'll follow her. The scene shifts, and the protagonist brings Avarice to the Hart family's blacksmith. Later, as they walk through the city, they thank each other for their help during the day. Then Fate asks why she didn't know about the wandering monster hunt. Roxy, visibly saddened, says the Verics family was put in charge and didn't bother to inform her. Then they find Hado bothering a child, so Roxy demands he leave him alone. But Memil claims they're just guarding a lost child, which Roxy doesn't believe. She asks the protagonist to help the boy and tells the Verics she'll take responsibility. Then she angrily asks Rafal why she wasn't informed about the hunt. He replies that he thought she'd be too preoccupied mourning her father. She says that's fine. The Verics prepare to leave, and Hado tells the protagonist he should act like the scum he is. As they leave, the boy says he hates the Holy Knights, and Roxy apologizes. The protagonist asks the boy what's wrong, and he says he lost his mother, so they start searching for the child's mother. Along the way, Fate remembers when he got lost, after his father died and he moved to the capital 5 years ago. He wonders what became of the Holy Knight who took care of him back then. As night falls, the protagonist thinks they won't find the boy's mother. Roxy offers to let the boy stay at her house for the night so they can search again tomorrow. But suddenly, the boy's mother appears, and they reunite. The protagonist is happy, but as he gazes at Roxy, he's captivated by her beauty. When she notices, she says it's time to go home before they get in trouble. Roxy asks if getting in trouble means they'd be together. Fate, surprised, promises that if that happens, he'll stay by her side. In the next scene, we learn that Haru scolded the two for what they did. The protagonist talks to Avarice about how to kill monsters without Roxy finding out. The next day, they search for a disguise and find a mask that alters perception. Avarice says it will change how people see him, so Fate buys it. He also buys a mineral rock as a thank you gift for Roxy. She accepts and opens the mineral, finding the very gem she had wanted. Avarice says Fate is a cheater for using his power. Roxy is overjoyed and offers him a year's worth of meat in thanks, but the protagonist refuses to accept anything in return. The scene shifts again to a meeting of the Holy Knights, where they'll discuss the expedition to Galia. We now see a group of warriors complaining about the Holy Knights for not solving their problems. Suddenly they see the lich appear, the one causing all the trouble, so one of them tells the others to run. Fate watches them flee and thinks to himself that they called him Lich the Corpse, smiling because he actually likes being called that. Greed then asks him if it's time to leave, but the protagonist replies no, he still wants to improve his stats. He tells his sword that he needs to grow stronger before the knights come after them. The scene changes and we see Fate performing his servant duties despite being extremely sleepy. He complains that living a double life isn't easy, and suddenly Lady Roxy approaches him. She tells him she's come to offer him a secret mission, which surprises the protagonist, who assumes it's another inspection. But in reality, Roxy takes him to the Hart family lands, where they see vast grape plantations. She admits that after seeing the grapes in the market, she wanted to bring him to the fields to see them up close. Eventually, they arrive at Roxy's home, where her mother welcomes them, despite saying it wasn't necessary. Her mother says she just felt much better than usual today. She then asks who the protagonist is, and Roxy explains that he's a servant she brought to introduce to everyone. Our main character, embarrassed, introduces himself to Roxy's mother, who says it's an honor to meet him and warmly welcomes him. Then she invites him closer to ask if he likes her daughter, something that makes Roxy blush. The protagonist is caught off guard by the question and thinks it was very sudden, but seeing her daughter's embarrassment, Aisha explains that she only asked to understand how Roxy is as a superior. The two youngsters are relieved. It wasn't the question they feared. Fate then kneels and tells Aisha that Roxy means a lot to him, and if permitted, he would gladly give his life to serve her. This moves both Roxy and her mother, who are visibly touched. Embarrassed, Roxy tells her mother she needs to rest in her room. The protagonist asks Aisha if he said something wrong, but Aisha responds that her daughter always acts like that when she's embarrassed. She even says that when Roxy was little, she would cry and freak out whenever she saw bugs. Fate is surprised, as he didn't expect that from someone like her who always seems composed. Aisha, with some nostalgia, says she still can't believe her little girl is now a holy knight. She also expresses concern about her overworking since the death of her father, when she suddenly became the head of the family. The protagonist replies that her daughter is an exemplary holy knight, and that many people believe in her. The next scene shows Roxy in her room looking at gifts and a picture of her father, remembering the day he taught her how to use a sword, proud of her for becoming a knight. She recalls telling him that she wanted to be like him and laugh alongside others. Her father, Mason, told her that's how a heart should be. Back in the present, Roxy regrets that she still hasn't fulfilled her promise. The next day, we see the protagonist harvesting grapes with other workers when one of them offers him a drink. He rests for a bit, enjoying the freshly squeezed grape juice, which he finds delicious. The worker tells him the Hart family has helped cultivate these grapes for generations, and they take pride in the taste. Hearing this reminds the protagonist of Sir Mason, which saddens the worker too. He mentions Roxy must be suffering, so he's grateful she visited this year. Fate is surprised and asks if Roxy helps out every year with the harvest. The man replies that she does, and also takes the opportunity to hunt monsters. He explains that this is harvest season, not just for grapes, and monsters like the kobolds come looking for food. They come from the northern valley. Suddenly, the protagonist's stomach growls, making the man laugh. It's normal to be hungry. But greed tells Fate that he's only been eating goblins, so it's not surprising that his gluttony is craving higher quality souls. Later, Roxy asks Fate to go ahead without her, as she still has work to do. On his way back, he meets a girl he doesn't recognize. As she walks past, he notices she has eyes just like his. He tries to assess her stats with his appraisal ability, but fails. She interrupts him and asks if it's too soon, to which he replies that he doesn't know what she's talking about. She tells him she came to hunt kobolds, but now leaves them to him. Before leaving, she says he owes her one for next time. Fate, confused, asks his sword who she is. Greed says he doesn't know, and the protagonist is surprised because Greed usually talks a lot. Greed defends himself, saying there are things he doesn't know either. Later, Roxy joins Fate and asks him to carry half of what they harvested. She explains she was delivering grapes. She sees the girl from earlier and says she might have seen her in Galia. Fate asks if Galia wasn't destroyed, and she says yes. She believes so. She adds that Galia was a great military power 4,000 years ago until it was overrun by monsters. Fate says there must have been survivors. Roxy replies she's never seen a pureblood from Galia before. She then asks the protagonist to return home. On the way, he brings up that he knows she hunts monsters and asks if she'll be okay on her own. Roxy says she won't be alone. Local warriors will accompany her. Smiling, she tells Fate everything will be fine. Suddenly, their basket of grapes falls, and they hurry to collect them. The next day, the Hart estate is devastated, the grape fields destroyed. Workers suspect monsters had a feast. We then see a large group of kobolds near a river. Roxy, the protagonist, and warriors are watching them. One warrior senses movement elsewhere, and they spot a massive kobold, surprising everyone. Greed tells Fate that if just looking at it makes him hungry, he knows what to do. Fate, on the brink of starvation, doesn't want Roxy to see him like that. The monster, level 50, is known as the Wailer. Greed says it's a crowned beast, born of accumulated violence, and unlike normal kobolds, it'll be trouble. Roxy tells the villagers she'll take care of it herself as a holy knight. They cheer for her, and she tells everyone but the warriors to evacuate. Greed tells Fate that Roxy won't be able to handle the beast alone. A warrior tells Roxy they need until tomorrow to prepare. Fate thinks the monster is too much for him, but he can't ignore what's happening or let Roxy die. That night, Fate goes alone to hunt the crowned kobold. Greed mocks him for trying to be a hero again. From a height, they observe the monster's guards. Fate plans to fight with insatiable hunger. He draws his bow and fires the first arrow. He slaughters the kobolds to gain levels and skills. But checking his stats, he still feels unprepared for the boss fight. He keeps killing until he must face the beast head-on. He shoots an arrow, but the monster catches it with its hand. Greed tells him to get closer and fight together. When Fate approaches, the beast unleashes its special move, Calamitous Blow, able to shatter armor and organs. Fate retreats, and another kobold attacks, injuring him. Then the crowned beast attacks again. Fate barely dodges but is wounded. Greed urges him to act, and we find out Fate was only pretending to be unconscious to lure an enemy closer. He cuts off a kobold's arm and defeats it. Greed says he can now use his hidden level 1 skill, but it requires 10% of Fate's attributes. Fate agrees, and Greed transforms to unleash the bloody ptarmigan. The powerful blast kills the crowned beast. Fate questions if the attack was too much. Suddenly, Gluttony activates and sends him into a frenzy. Greed panics. Fate has consumed too many high-quality souls and must resist, or he'll face something worse than starvation. Fate struggles in pain. The next day, Hart warriors find the slaughtered kobolds. Roxy wonders who did it. Everything is destroyed. Back home, she tells her mother and Fate what happened. Roxy suspects the girl from Galia, and Fate is relieved no one suspects him. Roxy, cheerful, says now they can rest. Aisha thinks her daughter smiles most when she's with Fate. Later, she privately asks him to support Roxy and stay by her side. Fate says he's not worthy. Aisha insists she doesn't ask for strength or prestige, only his desire to help her daughter from the heart. She reveals she was a powerless commoner, and that Roxy suffered because only her father was a knight. She then coughs and confesses she doesn't have much time left. She asks him again to protect her daughter. Fate agrees to think about it. Returning home with Roxy, he wonders if he's worthy since he's hiding the truth about his gluttony skill. The scene changes. Fate hunts goblins, but they no longer satisfy him. Greed says they can't help anymore. Fate needs stronger monsters. He must decide soon. He's running out of time. The next day, covering his eyes, he heads to the tavern, thinking he's unworthy of Roxy. Suddenly Ad enters, saying Sir Hado will hunt the lich known as Corpse. Fate is shocking. The barman says Hado is just looking for easy glory to avoid the Galia expedition. Fate is surprised there's already another expedition planned. Sir Mason just died. Ad says a decision will be made soon and hopes it's not the worst-case scenario. Later, the Holy Knights gather for orders. Roxy visits her father's grave to tell him she's been assigned to Galia. She prays for his protection. Fate appears and begs her not to go. She might never return, but Roxy turns away, saying she must leave. Greed says the Hart family is a nuisance to the Verics and others. He overheard that they planned the expedition to get rid of her. This infuriates Fate. Meanwhile, the Verics celebrate finally getting rid of Roxy. Memil tells Hado to take care of the rest. He asks if she and Rafal are going to Tenburn. Memil says it's for research, not pleasure. Hado asks if it's about immortality. Rafal dodges the question, but says she's counting on him to handle the lich. Finally, we see Fate in disguise. Thinking he can't disobey official orders, even if he can't stop Roxy from leaving, he won't allow others to be treated like garbage. Then Hado appears before him with a group of warriors. Hado asks the protagonist if he is cadaver, and then his warriors tell him that they will handle the protagonist. So Hado agrees and immediately orders them to attack him. But when they attack, the protagonist tells Greed that it feels like his opponents aren't even moving. Greed tells him that this is because of his attributes, and the protagonist says he plans to defeat them with a calamitous strike. After doing so, we see Hado in shock because the protagonist easily defeated his warriors. Then we see the remaining warriors abandon him, forcing Hado to beg them not to flee. But since his soldiers ignore his orders, he decides to face Cadaver himself. A little frightened, Hado asks Fate if he thinks he can mock him. While preparing to fight, the protagonist decides to take off his mask, revealing his true identity. Seeing him, Hado asks how he can be so powerful, but the protagonist responds that he has no reason to explain it. But hearing this angers Hado, and he tells him not to be so arrogant. He then tries to intimidate Fate, asking if he knows who he is, and reminding him that he is the second son of the Veric family. After hearing that, Fate, visibly annoyed, demands to see these so-called Holy Knight powers. Meanwhile, the protagonist analyzes Hado and sees that he has the Sacred Sword technique, which allows him to be a Holy Knight. He then wonders how Hado managed to learn it. After seeing Hado's attributes, our main character asks his sword if it can break a sacred sword. Greed tells him that no orichalcum sacred sword has an advantage over him, assuring Fate he can attack however he wants. But Hado says he is foolish because he can't win against him at this distance. Hado then mocks him while attacking with his technique called Grand Cross. However, when Hado thought he could send Fate to an early grave, he was shocked to see that Fate dodged his attack. Fate moves behind him, telling him he took too long to launch the strike. Then Fate destroys his sword, leaving the Holy Knight terrified and unable to believe what just happened. The protagonist holds the broken half of the sword and shows Hado the remains of his beloved weapon. He then tosses half of the sword to the ground and orders Hado to pick it up. But when Hado starts retreating, Fate tells him not to run away since he's supposed to be a Holy Knight. As his opponent continues stepping back, Fate calls him pathetic. Then Fate sees Hado fall to the ground, so he grabs him by his armor. He tells him he's going to teach him a lesson since, according to Hado's own words, dogs need discipline. Hado, frightened, begs him to stop, but Fate ignores him and smashes him against a tree, causing serious damage. When Hado continues begging for mercy, Fate glares at him and asks how he dares to say that after treating people like insects, while Lady Roxy has to risk her life because of him. Hado keeps pleading for mercy, but Fate ignores him and throws him into the air to attack with his technique called Bloody Ptarmigan. Greed gets excited because if they defeat him, they can take the Holy Knight's attributes. Finally, we see Hado gravely injured, asking why fate didn't finish him off. But as he begs fate to kill him, the protagonist says he still has several questions. Hado knows it's about Roxy, so he tells him she was assigned to a mission. Meanwhile, we see Roxy accepting the mission because she wants to save the citizens of her kingdom. Fate, for his part, admits he knew Roxy would say something like that. Hado, badly wounded, tells the protagonist he will have Roxy's expedition cancelled and begs for mercy. However, fate tells him to be quiet and, after stabbing him with his sword, says this is his revenge. After killing him, the gluttony skill activates. Now fate gains the sacred sword technique and an increase in his attributes. Greed, realizing what technique he acquired, tells him he is now a holy knight. But the protagonist replies that the capital would never accept something like that, and besides, he doesn't want it. Greed admits he expected that answer and then tells him he can now access his second level. When hearing this, fate immediately gives him permission to take his attributes because he despises having anything from Hado. As a result, Greed accesses his second level, showing the protagonist he can now transform into a giant scythe. He also explains that its blade is cursed and can cut through anything. Fate, hearing this, says he wishes he could cut off Roxy's trip to Galia at the root. The scene shifts, and we see Roxy preparing to leave for Galia. Before departing, she asks her servants not to look so gloomy because the 3 years she'll be in Galia will pass quickly. She then asks Haru to handle everything in her absence, which Haru accepts. After that, she approaches Fate, who looks very sad, and assures him they will see each other again. The protagonist changes his expression and tells Roxy to take care of herself, promising they will meet again. Finally, we see Roxy leaving, and later, Haru gives the protagonist a letter of recommendation that Roxy left for him. Haru tells him that with this, some mansion owner might hire him, keeping him out of Leric's reach. Fate, seeing the letter, thinks about how Roxy worried about him until the very end and tells Haru he can't accept it. He plans to continue his path as a warrior. The scene changes, and we see Fate telling his sword that if he can prevent Roxy from going to Galia, he will have to support her. Then we see Oliver and Minerva saying goodbye to the protagonist, telling him he can come back whenever he wants. We also learn that Haru paid Fate for his time working there, which surprises him because it's a lot. After saying goodbye to everyone, Fate begins his journey to Galia to protect Roxy. Elsewhere, we see Roxy giving a speech to many important people. She tells them she will take her father's position and head to the border to defeat the awakened divine dragon so she can protect the royal capital Seifort and all its people. Hearing this, the soldiers and citizens cheer for her. Next, Miria approaches Roxy, saying she will be by her side wherever she goes. They are interrupted by another warrior that, when hearing that Miria volunteered, says he did too. He introduces himself as Mugan, to which Miria replies that she knows he only wants to see the divine dragon, since he's a reckless man looking for a chance to test himself. Mugan admits she's right, because all warriors want to see how far their strength can go. Miria gets annoyed at his arrogance, and Roxy scolds her because she shouldn't behave like that. Mugan then says he volunteered because of Sir Mason, having once served under his command. He also confesses that, even if it sounds arrogant, he would like to avenge him. Roxy thanks him and asks if his family opposes him going to Galia. He says his daughter Rain only asked him for relics from that place because they descend from a long line of scholars. The scene changes, and we see Rain being told about the lich called Cadaver. Her companion shows her goblins he killed as a sample and asks her to look at their wounds because they're not from ordinary arrows. Rain examines the wounds and then searches through a book for information. After investigating, she tells her companion those are magical arrow wounds, which come from the Black Sword, one of the 7 deadly sin weapons. She explains that these weapons can manipulate magical power, expanding skill options. That's why she admits she wants to see them herself. In the next scene, we see Fate traveling with other warriors, and they're informed they'll arrive in Tetra. The protagonist tells us this is a merchant city with the best goods in the south. Looking at the city, he thinks it hasn't changed much, prompting Greed to ask if he's been here before. Fate says yes. 5 years ago, on his way to the capital. He asks a man if his transport goes to Galia, but the man replies not now because leaving the city at this hour means being attacked by monsters at night. He asks him to return tomorrow, and Fate agrees. While leaving, his stomach growls, so Greed suggests finding food and gathering information. He also tells him to shop for a sheath worthy of him. However, Fate says he will use the money Haru gave him to satisfy his craving for meat. Entering the tavern, he hears a man begging warriors for help. but because he's paying too little, they tell him it's not enough to kill the monster threatening his village. They humiliate him, forcing him to kneel and beg properly. Suddenly, fate intervenes, demanding they stop bullying the man in trouble. The warriors try to hit him, forcing fate to demonstrate his strength, leaving them speechless. While the man thanks fate, we learn the protagonist already knew him. He tells Set, "It's been a long time," surprising Set, who hadn't recognized him. The scene flashes back to Set and his friends bullying Fate when they were children. Even so, when his village was attacked, Fate's father had to rush to rescue them, leaving Fate impressed. We then see Fate learning to work with herbs because his father always returned injured. But one day, his father died, leaving Fate deeply saddened and causing the village to reject him because they didn't want another mouth to feed. However, in the present, Set kneels and begs Fate for help. Our main character tells us Set is the mayor's son, who exiled him, so he has to think carefully about helping him. Greed urges him to accept the job because it will help satisfy his gluttony. Fate agrees, telling Set he will handle the monsters, making him very happy. The protagonist admits he would be lying if he said he held no grudge, but he accepted because the village holds memories of his father. That night, the villagers complain to Set about bringing back the scum they exiled. Set tells them Fate is strong because he saw him beat warriors before his eyes, but the villagers scold him for not hiring proper warriors. Set's father then says he will personally find warriors the next day, worrying the villagers about whether they can withstand monster attacks in the meantime. The mayor reassures them, saying Fate will be their sacrifice to buy them some time. This enrages Fate, who is about to intervene, but Set stops him, asking him not to pay attention. Later, Set apologizes over tea, but Fate says he's used to mistreatment and asks about his wife. Set sadly explains she was killed by monsters because the village is too poor to hire warriors. Looking at his daughter, he says that since her birth, his belief in always trusting the mayor has changed. Now he wants to change for her sake. Fate, seeing his attitude, admits he noticed he has changed and asks about the monsters. Set explains they first appeared a month ago, apparently more than one, and they can fly. They're not the kind of monsters the village has experience with, hence why they sought warriors. Suddenly, Fate's stomach growls again, so Set brings him some food. Set admits he thought a few warriors could solve the problem, but flying monsters change everything. Fate asks Greed what they're dealing with, and Greed explains they're similar to gargoyles but smarter, using different attack methods. They also attack in groups, like kobolds. Suddenly, Set's daughter interrupts, asking who he's talking to. Fate replies he's talking to himself, and she gives him candy. Because of this, he asks if she wants to play, and she happily agrees. Finally, Set gives Fate some food, but suddenly Fate starts feeling sick, worrying Set and his daughter. Set's daughter says she gave him candy her grandfather gave her for him. Hearing this, Set panics because it seems his father is seriously planning to sacrifice Fate. But while he tries to wake Fate, they hear desperate screams outside from a monster attack. We then see the gargoyles destroying the village with their fire blasts. Greed, for his part, tries to wake up the protagonist, who doesn't react due to the drugs he was given, so he wonders what to do. Meanwhile, Set finishes preparing an antidote to help Fate wake up. On the other hand, in the village, people are shouting Fate's name because they need to sacrifice him. At last, the protagonist wakes up and Set tells him to vomit everything he ingested. As Fate starts to feel better, he asks Set where they are, and he responds that they're in his house. He then explains that they drugged him, causing him to fall asleep. Set apologizes because it was his father's fault, but the protagonist doesn't mind and immediately stands up. Fate tells his friend to stay inside the house because he is going to see what is happening outside. Our main character steps out of Set's house and finds total chaos caused by the flying monsters. He now has to face them, and Greed warns him that flying attacks are troublesome. He replies that he knows, then uses his appraisal ability to check the level and skills of his opponents. After analyzing them, his sword recommends using the giant scythe to fight them. Fate agrees and climbs to the top of a house to activate his giant scythe. He then decides to fight one of the gargoyles, which attacks him with its fireball skill. However, the protagonist easily manages to cut through it and complains to Greed because he said it could cut everything. Greed responds that it can cut all kinds of magic. Fire is just a special case. Suddenly they look up and see how the monsters combine their skills to create a giant fireball. They attack Fate, but he counters with another ability, stopping their attack and killing all the gargoyles at once. Afterward, the gluttony skill activates, and Fate gains the fireball skill. Feeling confident with this new power, he prepares to finish off the leader of the gargoyles, who is level 47 and has 2 skills, Fireball and Fire Resistance. Greed warns him that his opponent will charge in to launch the fireball, and that's the moment to strike. The protagonist follows the instructions and, with one powerful blow of his giant scythe, kills the leader. Now, aside from gaining higher attributes, he also obtains the fire-resistant skill. The next day, Set, seeing the destruction along with the protagonist and his daughter, tells Fate that his father is dead. Still, only a few people survived, so he believes the village is doomed. When he heard this, Fate uses his abilities to check for anything useful, but finds nothing. Looking at the ground, he notices it's infertile, so farming is impossible. Seeing this, Set asks if he knows how to use appraisal. Fate confirms it, and Set wonders why he became a warrior instead of living off such a skill. Fate thinks about how gluttony is a skill that defies divine law and answers that he has no choice but to fight, which surprises Set. Set says he'll look for work in the city to support his daughter. He then asks Fate to punch him as payment for everything he made him go through. Greed recommends doing it so that Set can feel at peace. Fate agrees and tells his friend to brace himself. He then punches him in the face, making Set fall to the ground. Greed scolds the protagonist for hitting too hard. With tears in his eyes, Set thanks Fate for punching him. Finally, the protagonist says goodbye, asking him to take care of his daughter. Set promises to do so and tells Fate to take care of himself too. The scene changes, and we see Fate visiting his parents' grave, lamenting the village's destruction. Still, he knows the memories with his father won't disappear. He promises his father that from now on, everything will be fine. The scene shifts to Roxy, who is nearing Lanchester territory. She tells her companions that they'll resupply upon arrival. Mugan warns her to be careful with Lanchester's lord, but when she asks why, he says she'll soon find out, prompting Miria to scold him for being so secretive. Meanwhile, the protagonist is being scolded for yawning too much and not guarding the carriage properly. The carriage owner complains, saying he's paying him 3 gold coins to do his job. Greed is annoyed because that's not much money, but the protagonist reassures the man that he can fight well despite his appearance because he trained as a knight. The man smiles, but suddenly, bandits block the road, demanding valuables if they want to live. Fate steps down and tells the bandits he'll be their opponent. Greed complains that he should have charged more for this job. The carriage owner clings to Fate, begging for protection because he has a wife and 2 small children at home. The bandits laugh at the man's fear, thinking their prey is easy. But just as they attack, a cursed sword falls from the sky, defeating them. Fate is surprised, and Greed says he only knows one person capable of that. It's the girl with the gluttony skill he met earlier, who introduces herself again. She stares at him and says he owes her for the kobolds incident. She then asks the carriage owner if she can travel with them, and he agrees since she helped earlier. But when she climbs in, her weight tips the cart over, so she asks her sword Sloth to return to normal, solving the problem. During the trip, she asks the protagonist's name, and when hearing it, she says she'll remember him as Fate the Glutton. Fate is shocked that she recognized his skill and asks how she knew. She replies that she knows because she also has one of the 7 deadly sin skills. Our main character asks what she means, and she wonders if Greed hasn't told him anything. While Greed plays dumb, she introduces herself as Mine of Wrath. Suddenly, her stomach growls, and she says she's hungry. Fate gives her some dried meat, which she quickly devours, including his portion. They're then interrupted by the carriage owner announcing their arrival at the city. The scene changes to a girl being frightened by 2 masked people. A holy knight rushes to her rescue and defeats them. The girl is amazed and asks his name, to which he replies he is Rudolph, Lord of Lanchester. Greed and the protagonist, who watch the whole scene, wonder what kind of circus they've arrived at. The carriage owner explains that Rudolph is preparing to welcome the Galia expedition. Fate asks if that's the one led by Lady Roxy, and he confirms, saying they'll arrive soon. The protagonist is surprised, and Greed laughs, saying they ended up ahead of her even though they were trailing behind, frustrating Fate. The man pays him 3 coins for the job, but Mine snatches them, saying she'll keep them since she was the one who saved them. While the protagonist wonders what to do next, Mine falls asleep on his back, forcing him to carry her. Greed asks him to be considerate since she's not much of a morning person. Fate notices Greed seems to know a lot about her and questions him, but the sword remains silent. They are welcomed to Lanchester by 2 citizens. Fate wonders if knights are worshipped here and notices symbols on their necks. While walking, he's blocked by 2 guards who tell him certain areas are for citizens only, then direct him to lodging, where he notices their symbols are different. As he explores, he sees various symbols and wonders what they mean. Greed suggests they might represent social classes, but Fate suspects they mean something else entirely. Later, Rudolph scolds the masked people who attacked the girl, saying their behavior doesn't reflect Lanchester's greatness. He reminds them they must show superiority over the Hart family. Despite their pleas for mercy, Rudolph kills them. Those watching worry because Rudolph kills more people each day, so they think it's best not to anger him or they'll end up dead too. Meanwhile, the protagonist finally finds lodging, allowing Mine to sleep peacefully. Greed admits he didn't expect to see her alive, so Fate asks how he knows her. Greed replies they are old acquaintances, like with Sloth, another sin weapon. Fate then asks about sin skills, and Greed explains that gluttony, wrath, greed, sloth, lust, envy, and pride are skills that defy divine law, earning them the title 7 Deadly Sin Skills. Among them, gluttony is the most sinful because it can overturn the divine leveling system. Fate finally understands why. Once gluttony tasted a soul, there was no turning back. Greed says everyone pays one way or another, just like mine does. Fate wonders why this happened to him, thinking the gods mocked him, giving him what seemed like a useless skill that only made him hungry, which forced him to kill to survive. He questions what good there is in such power. Greed warns that such sentimentality will one day cost him his life, because if his mind is weak, gluttony will take control, so he must be strong to resist. The key, Greed says, is staying on the verge of starvation. That night, Greed advises him not to satisfy gluttony all at once, but to do it gradually. They then fight a Sandman, which Greed suggests using to test control. Fate combines Fireball with his arrow, creating a more powerful attack, defeating it, and triggering gluttony. Greed tells him to endure because there are more Sandmen nearby. Fate tries to resist the urge to kill them all. Meanwhile, Mine wakes up hungry, searching for food. On her way back, she sees a poster promising a reward for defeating the sand golem. A man explains that even Rudolph couldn't defeat it, and if it isn't killed, death awaits them all. Fate keeps fighting Sandmen, and Greed praises him for learning quickly. The protagonist says it feels like drinking a drop of water in a desert. Greed says it's time to satisfy gluttony before it drives him insane. Sensing a crowned beast nearby, Fate decides to hunt it as his main course. We see a group of warriors struggling against the sand golem, considering fleeing. Suddenly, a mysterious warrior, Fate, attacks from behind, claiming the monster as his own. Despite warnings about the danger, he uses appraisal and finds its level 60 with the Sandstorm skill. He shoots a fire arrow, but the monster defends with Sandstorm. Fate activates his giant scythe, cutting through the storm and killing the monster. When the monster's core tries to escape, Fate asks Greed to keep 10% of his power for Bloody Ptarmigan, but Greed demands 20%, and Fate agrees, adding fire to the attack. Together, they finish the crowned beast, gaining the Sandstorm skill. After the battle, they feel they may have overdone it. The other warriors approach, impressed since they'd never seen anyone fight like that. They laugh at his grim outfit, but their leader, Bard, thanks him and introduces himself. Hearing the name Cadaver surprises him. The next day, Fate finds Mine naked in the room. She says she isn't embarrassed and accuses him of having a dirty mind. He promises he's not thinking that way. Later, she says she'll hunt the sand golem, but Fate tells her he already defeated it. Angry at losing her reward, she listens as Fate offers her half the bounty. Together, they collect 100 coins for defeating the sand golem. Seeing his cadaver mask, Mine says it's ugly. Fate says he had to wear it since he fought as Cadaver. Suddenly, Rudolph shows up demanding Fate fight under his command. Fate asks what's going on, and Rudolph replies that no one can refuse a holy knight. Mine steps in, saying she won't let him take Fate because she found him first. Rudolph questions who she is, saying a brat like her should be with her mother. In response, Mine lands a powerful blow, sending him flying, shocking everyone present. Fate scolds her for what she did, knowing it will cause trouble, and decides it's time to leave the city. During the trip, the protagonist asks Mine if she is sure she has wrath and not gluttony because of how much she eats. Frustrated, he also asks how much more she plans to eat, to which she replies that anger burns many calories. But Fate tells her that despite eating so much, she hasn't developed at all. Hearing this, Mine gets angry and prepares to hit him, which causes the carriage wheel to break under the weight of her weapon. The carriage driver then has to repair his vehicle. Fate thanks him for fixing it, but the man says it won't be free, which makes the protagonist sad. Suddenly, he notices that Mine is gone, and while looking for her, sees she is leaving on her own. Our main character gets annoyed because she always does whatever she wants, yet he still chases after her. Eventually, they arrive at a village that Fate thinks looks very peaceful, but Greed reminds him that they are near Galia, which means monsters are always a threat. Because of that, he believes someone powerful must be protecting this village, and Fate agrees. Fate then asks about the castle they see in the distance, and Greed tells him it's Hausen Castle. The protagonist says he thought Seyfort was the only one with a castle around here. They then see a warrior, and Fate asks if he knows where the village chief is, because they need a place to stay for a while. The warrior turns around and tells them he's the one in charge of the village. Greed notices the man has a holy sword and is surprised. Fate asks his sword if that man is a holy knight, and Greed answers that he must be the one protecting the village. The man approaches Fate and says that if they want to stay, they must first cross swords with him. So Fate uses his appraisal skill, and the man, noticing it, stops him from using it further. He then says he's surprised that Fate is level 1 with attributes of over 2 million. The protagonist is shocked to realize he didn't notice when his opponent used appraisal on him. The Holy Knight then very seriously asks if they will start fighting or not. Fate gets ready and begins the battle, in which he is defeated by the experienced warrior. Feeling down, he laments that he can't stay in the village. But the man says the opposite. Since he sees purpose in this meeting, he can stay. However, there's one condition. During his stay, he must train under his supervision. Fate is surprised to hear this and asks why, to which the man replies it's just an old man's whim. But since Fate and Greed think this is suspicious, they try using appraisal again. The man then asks if Fate doesn't know how to counter appraisal and also points out that he doesn't know how to take advantage of his skills. He says Fate's body is still not accustomed to his strength, which surprises the protagonist. The man continues and says his fighting style will only work against monsters, not humans. That's why he thinks there's nothing to lose if they train together. Greed warns Fate that it's suspicious that the village chief asks for nothing in return, but Fate thinks you don't get to train with a holy knight every day, so he accepts the offer. The man introduces himself as Aaron Barbatos, but suddenly they are interrupted by Mine. Aaron sees her and thinks she is a very skilled warrior, leaving Fate speechless because he has no way of knowing that. Mine, for her part, tells Fate she found a place where they can camp, but Fate tells her he already found lodging, which amazes her. Later, while Mine rests, the protagonist begins his training with Aaron. He is surprised that his first training is with bare hands, and his teacher explains it's the best way to control his attributes. Fate comments that he'll be like an open book, which Aaron thinks is typical of warriors who grow strong quickly. The protagonist follows his master's instructions during combat training. Aaron shows him how to gain more power and speed in his strikes, so he can unconsciously use all his strength. Fate does everything Aaron says and realizes he is right because he moves better when relaxed. He also thinks he will be able to control his attributes better this way, but suddenly gluttony takes effect, causing one of his eyes to change color. Aaron asks what's going on, and Fate complains about it happening. Thanks to gluttony, however, he starts moving faster, which surprises his teacher, so Aaron decides to show him what he can do, and Fate manages to dodge his attacks thanks to gluttony. Greed, noticing how Fate is moving, congratulates him for doing wonderfully even while hungry. Later, after training, Aaron tells Fate that the next day they will train in a real battle. But when Fate tries to return home, he senses the smell of a monster coming from the castle. Suddenly, he hears Aaron shouting, so he rushes to him. But when he enters the house, he finds Mine sleeping after eating all the food. Fate apologizes for what his friend did, and his master says it doesn't matter. He then explains that he now has to go distribute food among the villagers. Fate, looking at Mine, gets angry because she causes trouble when he is starving, so he draws on Mine's face, even though Greed warns him not to. Meanwhile, Aaron looks at the castle with nostalgia. Later, Fate notices a picture of Aaron with his family, and Greed says Aaron's son looks like him. He realizes there may be a reason Aaron is in charge of this remote village. The next day, Aaron asks Fate to try to deflect his attack with a wooden stick as training. Fate complains it's just a stick that will break, but Aaron replies that since he trained him, he should be able to handle it. Aaron attacks, forcing Fate to analyze and receive it. Aaron congratulates him for blocking his sword and says he can now control his attributes. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Mine, who says she brought Fate a gift. She uses charcoal to take revenge for his prank by drawing a beard on his face. In the next scene, the protagonist shares a meal with his teacher and Mine. Fate tells his teacher they are leaving tomorrow and thanks him for everything, but seeing Mine eat, he apologizes for her, to which Aaron says not to worry and offers him her portion. Mine interrupts, saying she can't taste food, making her think her taste buds are useless. Greed tells Fate that this is the price of wrath, which shocks him. Mine then says she has a mission, which brings memories to Aaron. He looks at the castle with nostalgia, prompting Fate to ask if something is there. Aaron explains that the castle once belonged to him, but that was 15 years ago when he abandoned it under royal orders. In the next scene, we see Aaron's son defending the castle from monsters in his absence. However, he was attacked by a crowned beast that took his life and that of his people. Aaron says that the beast was born from accumulated aggression. Since that day, Hausen Castle has been the genesis of death. He laments that his family is still in its clutches. Suddenly, gluttony affects Fate, forcing him to step outside. He looks at the castle, and Aaron, realizing he wants to go there, offers to join him, saying this is his chance to lay his past to rest. Mine assures them she will watch the village, but only for 50 gold coins. The scene changes, and we see the castle glowing as warriors outside are slaughtered. Aaron is surprised to see Fate's magical arrows, which also have a petrifying sandstorm effect. His teacher tells him that's a complex technique that even stopped being studied in the capital. They continue advancing into the castle, encountering many skeletal warriors along the way. Aaron and Fate defeat them easily and reach the castle's interior. Climbing the stairs, they arrive at a room where Aaron sees his family still alive, shocking him. His wife Diana and son Luke say they have been waiting for him for a long time. Then his son asks if he finished the king's mission. Aaron replies yes, because he stopped the stampede, which pleases his son, who asks for details. Fate asks Greed what is happening. Greed answers that despite appearing alive, they aren't. It's an illusionary spell. The protagonist worries everything is fake, and, watching Aaron talk to his family, notices his son plans to attack. But before he can warn him, Aaron blocks the attack and proudly tells his son he became stronger. Luke says he had to do it to protect the castle in his absence, and complains that he abandoned them for years. He criticizes his father for caring only about work and suddenly returning with the intent to kill them. Fate tells his teacher he can break illusions and activates the Black Scythe, but Greed warns that breaking skill effects would also destroy them, and the souls consumed by gluttony can't pass on to the afterlife, leaving them trapped in eternal torment. This makes Fate decide he can't do it. Meanwhile, Aaron keeps fighting and asks Fate to let him handle his family. Our main character agrees and says he will go after the Lord Lich responsible for all this. He reaches a room filled with the stench of his enemy and fires an arrow at its location. Fate uses appraisal and discovers it is level 100 with over 1,000,000 attributes. He tries to fight it, remembering Aaron's teachings, but even though he wounds the Lord Lich, the monster uses corpse control powers to shield itself. Fate hears the controlled corpses begging for help, so he hesitates to attack them. Suddenly, Greed warns he's being attacked from behind, but the corpses drop to the ground, disabled by Aaron, who apologizes for arriving late. He says he will cut their tendons to immobilize them. Aaron sees his wife's body, which repeats the last words she told him before he left. He recalls how his wife and son didn't agree with him taking such a dangerous mission, but he reassured them and promised he would return after dealing with the monster. Now he believes that if he had returned sooner, things might have been different, but since it's impossible, all he can do is end their suffering. Aaron uses his Grand Cross skill to counter Lord Lich's powers. Fate sees it won't be enough and wonders how to help until he notices Aaron's son's sword. He picks it up and shows his teacher he can help, which surprises Aaron, who tells him to join their swords to amplify the Grand Cross attack. Together, they finally kill the Lord Lich. The scene changes, showing Aaron holding his family's bodies. He apologizes for making them wait so long, and suddenly their souls appear, surprising Fate. Luke tells his father it wasn't his fault, and Diana adds that he saved them. Aaron laments and says he wishes he had decided sooner, correcting himself to say he never should have left them, since they were more important than any order, yet they suffered because of it. Aaron promises to live to honor their memory and gives Luke a keepsake, hugging them all. But the Lord Lich, still alive, tries to attack Aaron. However, Fate stops it and activates his gluttony skill because he doesn't want anyone disturbing his master. This causes him great pain in his eye as a sign gluttony was satiated. Finally, Aaron says goodbye to his family, telling them to go ahead and wait for him. He plans to join them when he's done with his duties. Later, Fate is shocked to hear his master exceeded his limits. Aaron says it was from fighting alongside him, and Greed confirms it. Aaron then says he has to leave to defeat a horde of monsters. Seeing the number of skeletons left, Fate suggests they compete to see who kills more. The scene changes, showing the two of them returning at dawn. Angering Mine for taking so long, Aaron gives her a bag full of coins for waiting so long. Mine touches the bag and says they need money to rebuild the village, adding that money never lies, something Fate will learn if he lives long enough. Aaron then remembers where he had seen her before. 50 years ago, when monsters attacked the village, he saw her there. Fate is shocked to hear it was 50 years ago, and Aaron says she looks the same. Mine congratulates him for his good eye and says that after a millennium of training, he might match her. Aaron and Fate say that was harsh, but she insists because humans have limits. Aaron asks what she is, and Mine answers, she's just a ghost that can't die. In the next scene, Aaron tells Fate that his eyes are back to normal. Fate explains he has a problem that forces him to kill monsters often, or else his eyes turn red. After hearing this, Aaron asks him to return to this place once he finishes everything, because he has something for him. Elsewhere, we see the Verics brothers finding the Philosopher's Stone, which can heal diseases and injuries. Memil tells Raphael that perhaps immortality isn't so far off. Suddenly, a servant interrupts, saying Hado was defeated. He tells them that according to witnesses, Cadaver is not a monster, but just a warrior. Raphael gets angry, wondering about Cadaver's true identity. In the next scene, we move alongside Lady Roxy, who continues her journey toward Galia. When Miria asks how much farther they need to travel, Roxy tells her they are already near the border. They finally arrive at Hausen, where Miria is surprised to see the large castle in the village. Roxy explains that this place is the capital of Barbados and that Sir Aaron used to live in that castle. But she also mentions that, according to the latest information she had, the castle is now inhabited by a Lord Lich who made it his own. The group then approaches the castle, where Lady Roxy tells her companions that she doesn't sense any monsters. Mugen responds that it seems the castle was recently liberated, and then Aaron arrives to welcome them. The warriors show their respect upon meeting a leader of the Barbados, one of the 5 great families. Roxy tries to introduce herself, but he demonstrates that he remembers her because he is an old acquaintance of Mason and Aisha, who, when she was little, asked him to give her her name. Hearing this leaves Roxy completely surprised. Roxy then asks about the liberation of his castle, and Aaron tells her he did not do it alone. He confesses that he owes it all to the man who fought at his side, and Mugan comments that the man must have been very talented to have defeated the Lich. Miria asks where that man is, as she wants to meet him, but Aaron replies that he has already left. Roxy then asks for his name, as she needs to report to the capital that the Lord Lich has been eliminated. But Aaron says he cannot reveal it because the warrior asked him to keep his name a secret. She understands and says she will respect that, then says goodbye as she must head to Galia. Aaron asks if she was sent there by the Verics, but she assures him she volunteered. The elder tells her she was manipulated because the Harts and Barbados have always been a nuisance to them. She replies that it doesn't matter because she will still protect people, having inherited her father's values. Aaron is visibly affected when he hears Mason has died, then offers to teach Lady Roxy a few things. To her surprise, he offers to give her lessons on how to fight in Galia, which she happily accepts. The scene changes to Roxy's companions helping the villagers with reconstruction work, while Roxy faces Aaron in combat, who praises her for handling Mason's style well. Meanwhile, we switch to the protagonist and Mine, who are walking through the place where she was born. She tells Fate that she ended up in the imperial capital after birth, so she doesn't remember much, only that it's important. She then takes him to a place where they can see a cocoon, which surprises Fate. Avarice, seeing the cocoon, confesses to being surprised that someone survived. He explains that it's a chimera, a biological weapon used by Galia's army in the past. For that reason, he considers it a failure to see one here because all of them were supposed to have been buried. Mine interrupts, telling Fate they are going to fight the chimera. Fate uses his skills to check its stats and gets excited by the attributes, though he notes he can't see its skills. Mine explains they can fight it because it is in larva mode. She adds that no matter how much they damage its body, if its soul remains intact, it won't die. Fate then asks if she's implying he must use his soul-devouring powers. She answers yes, saying it's the most atrocious and heretical of all sin skills, and charges at the chimera, waking it up. Our main character notices there's a person inside the chimera's body and is shocked to see it has the same eyes. Avarice warns him not to keep looking or he won't be able to move. Mine explains that the person is the chimera's core and must be destroyed. Fate disagrees, arguing that devouring its soul will cause the person to suffer eternally. But Mine insists he not be deceived by appearances because it's only a monster with a human shell. Suddenly, the chimera launches a devastating lava attack, forcing them to flee. Mine tells Fate to fall back, then shows him how she blocks the chimera's attack. She instructs him to split up so they can attack from different sides, which Fate agrees to. They manage to damage the monster, but are shocked when it regenerates. Avarice explains that a chimera is a weapon capable of fighting without support. While Fate wonders how to defeat it, he sees Mine striking harder and harder. His sword explains that Sloth gets stronger with each strike, but at the cost of speed. The chimera lets out a loud roar, revealing it is undergoing metamorphosis. Mine tells Fate to stand behind her, but he decides he wants to change and show his own strength instead of always being protected. He tells Mine he will enter semi-starvation mode, and she warns that gluttony could take over him. Fate replies that he knows, but it's the only way he can be useful. He then struggles to control gluttony, eventually succeeding, and tells Mine he did it. With that, they launch a counterattack, performing a combination strike that puts the chimera on the defensive. The chimera, seeing its health in danger, creates a protective barrier. Fate tries to break it with his black scythe, but can't. Avarice tells him to read the flow of magical power to find the weak point, which he does, damaging the enemy severely. Seeing itself at a disadvantage, the chimera tries to flee. Mine tells Fate to get on her sword so she can launch him. She hurls him toward the chimera, and Fate uses his sword's second-level secret technique, attempting to finish it off. However, the chimera traps him, intending to self-destruct with him inside. Fate doesn't hesitate and strikes with all his strength, injuring its power source. This triggers his telepathy, where he sees children being used by adults. When the ability deactivates, he admits to feeling great sadness. Avarice tells him it's normal because he just devoured one of his own kind, which is why he feels no joy. We then see Mine saying goodbye to the chimera, which she had forgotten about after so many years. She sadly explains that anyone who becomes a chimera must always be killed, or they will cause destruction. Thinking it could happen to him too, Fate begs Mine to kill him without hesitation if he ever loses control. She hugs him and promises she will. Later, Fate tells Mine he will go to Babylonia, and she reminds him to keep his promise to build a village. She also warns him that they may never see each other again because he will die first. The protagonist is shocked to hear this, and, because leveling up reset his attributes, asks her to help him raise them again. In the next scene, Fate arrives at Babylonia, a stronghold between the kingdom and Galia. When they enter, he is shocked to see everything costs 5 times more than in the capital. Suddenly, he hears that the new Lord of Babylonia has arrived, making Fate nervous when he sees Roxy. The scene changes, and the protagonist tells us that this city gathers many warriors of different types and specialties. Avarice comments that if someone is strong in Babylonia, they can do whatever they want. Thinking about how many people need help, Fate believes this is the perfect place for him. In the next scene, Lady Roxy meets Northern Alistair, who welcomes her with great honor. She thanks him for taking care of the city in her father's absence, but Northern cannot accept her gratitude because he failed to protect Sir Mason. However, Roxy asks him to raise his head and confesses that she came here to follow in her father's footsteps. Hearing this makes Northern happy, and he looks at her fondly, which annoys Miria. Before she can intervene, Mugan stops her, warning that she might lose her head if she acts rashly. Meanwhile, Fate complains about how expensive it is to live in the city, even just for basic needs. Suddenly, Avarice points out a scabbard in a shop and asks Fate to buy it. Fate thinks it's going to be too expensive and refuses, but unexpectedly, the shop boy comes out. The boy is amazed by the burns on Fate's cloak because they aren't ordinary burns. Avarice tells Fate that the boy has a good eye and that he trusts him, which is why he wants the scabbard. Fate asks for the price, and the boy says it's just a display item. But if Fate wants, he can make a custom one, which Fate agrees to, handing over Avarice. The boy is impressed by the sword and says a custom scabbard will cost 500 coins. Fate immediately says he doesn't want it anymore and quickly leaves. The scene shifts, and when Fate is outside the city, a group of warriors invites him to join them. He refuses because he prefers to work alone, which intimidates the warriors because of his appearance. Fate decides to improve his image and goes out to hunt beasts to earn more coins. He finally reaches Galia and complains about the foul smell caused by the corpses. Suddenly, he encounters some mushroom spores, and Avarice warns him not to breathe them because they are toxic. Fate hurries to get out, but Avarice warns of an incoming stampede of 50 orcs. Avarice tells him that orcs are intelligent and likely to coordinate their attacks, so he should fight them as if they were humans. Hearing this, Fate prepares to apply what he learned from Eren. However, before he can attack, the warriors from earlier rush ahead. Avarice scolds him and orders him to deal with the orcs so they can afford the scabbard. Fate doesn't want to disrespect the warriors, but then another group of orcs attacks, so he decides to take them all down on his own. Using Avarice's 3rd level, Fate stops the orcs' attacks and follows his sword's instructions to charge at them. He ends up destroying all the orcs in his path using only the shield. When he finishes, he notices that the gluttony skill is unusually calm, and Avarice reminds him that it has been that way ever since he defeated the chimera. Avarice tells him to collect the rewards from the corpses so they can return to Babylonia. In the next scene, Fate surprises all the warriors when he walks in carrying many orc ears for payment. But one member of the warrior group he saved accuses him of stealing their loot. Because they try to take his orc ears, Fate is forced to demonstrate his great strength. After defeating them all, the woman in charge of processing rewards gives him 100 gold coins. However, before he leaves, Lady Roxy arrives, asking if he defeated all those warriors. She approaches him angrily, so Fate explains the situation to prevent it from escalating. We then see Mugen holding back all the warriors who attacked Fate. He asks Roxy what will happen to him, and she replies that although he went too far, he isn't responsible for the city's decline, which is partly her fault, and also due to the absence of the Holy Knight who protected the city. For that reason, he will escape punishment this time, but she tells the other warriors they will receive the same benefit. However, she orders them to spend one night in the dungeon to reflect on the trouble they caused. Then Miria demands that Fate remove his mask now that he is speaking with Lady Roxy, but Marua and Roxy tell her to stop because the mask is part of his warrior attire. Roxy asks for his name, and he replies that it's Cadaver. After confirming his identity, she asks him not to cause any more trouble. Before leaving, she also advises him to take care of his appearance because it draws too much attention. Hearing this, Fate quickly leaves, intending to change his look. Later, the protagonist meets the boy from the weapon shop. The boy says he knows about his fight with the warriors and offers to let him use his combat gear. Before that, he introduces himself as Jade Stratos and explains he's only had his shop for 3 months. When they arrive at the shop, Jade asks Fate to use his products in exchange for promotion. Jade admits he was looking for a warrior to form a mutually beneficial partnership, so he asks if Fate wants to work with him, and Fate quickly agrees. In the next scene, Jade gives Fate a new set of equipment, including new clothes. He tells Fate it will cost only 80 gold coins, surprising him, but Jade says he'll only charge 40. Leaving the shop, Fate heads to find a cheap place to eat. On the way, he sees a young woman he can't take his eyes off, worried she might know his identity, even with the mask on. Fate realizes she has a deadly sin skill. She introduces herself as Heiress of Lust. The scene changes, and Eris invites Fate for a drink and tells him he can remove his mask. However, looking into her eyes makes him uncomfortable, and she apologizes, saying it's a side effect of her skill. Fate then asks what she meant when she said she was waiting for him. Eris replies that she had been watching him since he lived in the capital, and when she saw his gluttony awaken, she considered contacting him, but she decided to wait, assuming he would meet Avarice. She explains that she belongs to the first generation, unlike mine, who is from the second, which is why they don't get along. Eris remembers the death of Haniel the Chimera and congratulates him, saying it must not have been easy. Fate asks if she knows everything, but Eris answers no. She reveals, for example, that she doesn't know where the rest of the cocoons are, which could cause many problems. Finally, Eris tells Fate that she was waiting for him because she needed to tell him that she is a sentinel of the kingdom and must prioritize the kingdom's affairs over any individual, so that one day everyone will benefit. For that reason, she says, Roxy Hart must die in Galia. Her words anger Fate, who questions her decision, but Eris gives her reasons, justifying it by saying it will create a future pillar of the kingdom with an incredible skill, and that Roxy's death will guide the kingdom toward the right choice. Fate, very upset, tells her that her death will bring nothing good, and then leaves, promising to stop Eris's plan. The next day, Northern informs Roxy that they lost contact with a squad that went to Galia to collect raw materials. She asks where the squad was headed, and he tells her to the Great Ravine. Lady Roxy then tells her companions that they will proceed to rescue them, so they set off toward Galia. Meanwhile, Jade tells the protagonist that to make an ideal sheath for the sword Avarice, he needs a magic crystal. Since the royal army controls the supplies, it's very difficult to obtain one. Hearing this, Fate asks where he can find a magic crystal, and Jade answers, in Galia. So our main character decides to go there. Jade happily shows him the map his lord used to gather materials. Fate examines it carefully and realizes he must go to the area near the Great Ravine. The scene shifts to the protagonist in Galia, where he must face a group of orcs. By activating Avarice's level 3 again, he easily defeats them. Meanwhile, Lady Roxy and her companions discover that compasses don't work in this place. Mugan tells them they will have to navigate using the moon and stars, but because of the clouds, Roxy says it won't be possible to see the the moon, which angers Miria. However, Roxy says she heard rumors that one can navigate Galia based on orc density, as records show the largest colonies are located at the far south. She also warns them that in Galia, there aren't just orcs, but crowned beasts as well. The scene changes to the protagonist trying to get some rest at night. In his dreams, he meets the girl who controlled the chimera, who tries to speak to him. Fate doesn't understand what she's saying because he can't hear her, and suddenly he panics when he finds himself surrounded by blood and corpses. The corpses trap him against his will, terrifying him. He wakes up very worried and immediately senses the presence of crowned beasts. Using his night vision, he discovers a stampede of salamanders. Avarice tells him to attack with petrifying magic, but when he does, Fate notices something strange. The salamanders are neither fleeing nor attacking. Avarice suggests that they might be under someone's control. Thinking this through, Fate decides they need to pursue them to investigate. Meanwhile, the salamanders attack Roxy's camp while everyone is sleeping. Dodging their first attacks, Lady Roxy asks about Northern's whereabouts, but he suddenly appears, apologizing for being overpowered. Miria sees a salamander attacking Lady Roxy and wants to finish the beasts quickly, but her attack fails to harm them, and she gets injured instead. Roxy, who is nearby, tries to help, leaving herself defenseless against the beast. Just as the salamander is about to strike, Cadaver arrives to save her. The protagonist then takes care of all the beasts using Avarice, leaving everyone shocked. After finishing off all the enemies, Roxy approaches Fate to thank him for what he did. Mugan introduces himself to the protagonist, and also introduces Miria, who is angry at Cadaver. After the introductions, Cadaver points out something more worrying, a mark on the beasts. The warriors notice that all 4 beasts have the same emblem on their heads. Worried, Miria says that it seems all of them were targeting Lady Roxy. Hearing this, the protagonist thinks Eris has something to do with it, while Northern remarks that everything changed after the celestial dragon left. In the next scene, everyone arrives at the Great Ravine and splits up to complete their respective missions. On his route, the protagonist finds a petrified monster graveyard, leaving him astonished. Avarice reminds him they need to look for crystals, so Fate resumes his search. While recalling Jade's description, he spots Eris from afar, but she quickly runs away from sight. Avarice tells him to look to his side, where he discovers a chimera. Worried, Fate is reassured by Avarice, who says it seems to be a prototype without a core, likely remnants of an old battle. Upon further inspection, Fate discovers there were 3 chimeras, wondering if Eris is involved. Suddenly, an explosion to the east catches his attention. That's where Lady Roxy was headed. Worried, he rushes there immediately. Elsewhere, Roxy and her companions face 2 chimeras trying to kill the Holy Knight. Just as the beasts are about to finish her, the protagonist arrives to the rescue. Fate explains that the chimera's weakness is their core, which powers their movement. Hearing this, Roxy and Miria prepare to help him finish them off. However, the chimeras try to prevent them from getting close, not knowing that Fate has the fire-resistance skill. Passing through the flames, he creates the perfect opening for Roxy to defeat one chimera. Meanwhile, Miria blocks attacks with her sword, but asks them to hurry or she'll die. Seeing this, Fate quickly helps her despite her dislike of him. Roxy orders Miria to evacuate everyone, including her partner, because she and Cadaver will take care of the rest. We then see them prepare to repeat their coordinated attack from earlier, easily defeating the chimera. Now, they face the last enemy standing, who uses another technique to attack, forcing Fate to save Lady Roxy again, this time earning her trust. Later, Fate wakes up at the bottom of a pit and realizes his mask is missing. Panicked, he searches for it before Roxy wakes up, and after finding it, she awakens in pain. Fate creates a fireball to light the place and tells Roxy about the chimeras. He then asks if she found the supplies she was looking for. Sadly, she tells him they were too late because the entire base and the squad were reduced to ashes. She then asks who told him about the chimeras, and he answers, a Galia survivor. Roxy asks if it was a girl with a giant axe. She had seen her in her territory and later heading here. Knowing she is referring to mine, the protagonist pretends not to know. But Roxy says that girl was traveling with a masked young man, forcing Fate to admit it's him. He asks her not to look at him directly, and she apologizes, confessing he reminds her of someone who lives in the capital and whom she always feels is by her side. Suddenly, Roxy wonders if she did the right thing for Fate, and he reassures her, saying she surely made him happy. Unexpectedly, his semi-starvation state activates, forcing him to flee from Roxy. During his escape, he encounters the remaining chimera and violently attacks it, completely controlled by gluttony. When he finishes, he notices the chimera also has an emblem, making him suspect once again that Eris is involved. Suddenly, after Roxy reaches his side, An explosion draws their attention. They see fossilized animals filled with magic crystals. In the next scene, the group emerges to the surface, where Miria is happily waiting for Lady Roxy. A month later, Roxy challenges the protagonist to a fair duel. Fate, not understanding her reasons, wonders if he did something wrong, and Miria tells him it's because of all his violent outbursts against others, events that started since they returned from the Great Ravine. She questions how such things were possible. The protagonist replies that everyone who got hurt attacked him first. Lady Roxy admits she understands his situation, but she can't ignore his violent acts. To remedy these issues, she suggests he join the royal army, so thugs will avoid causing him trouble. However, Fate refuses, thanking her for her concern but saying he's someone who doesn't follow orders. Hearing this, Roxy tells him he will then have to spend time in a jail cell to reflect, but Fate says he doesn't want that and immediately prepares to fight her without even unsheathing his weapon. During the fight, Fate is surprised he can't overcome Roxy despite having better attributes. With great skill, she pushes him to his limits, even breaking his mask. Roxy tells him that if he doesn't take the fight seriously, she will expose his identity. For that reason, Fate decides to grant her wish by using a Holy Knight technique, shocking everyone. He explains he can do so thanks to his special sheath, which enhances his holy weapon techniques. Lady Roxy is intrigued by how he wields his weapon and asks if he used to be a holy knight. He answers no, reflecting on how he is now a completely different person. He then launches an attack, pushing Roxy into a tight spot, but just before finishing her, he notices the gem he gave her. Distracted, the Holy Knight defeats him, prompting Avarice to scold him for being an idiot. After the fight, Roxy questions why he let his guard down, but he pretends ignorance to avoid answering. Before he leaves, she asks if he was trained by Sir Aaron, as she had been too, noting that his attacks and footwork reminded her of their master. She tells him Aaron once said he met a traveler with so much power he even caused him trouble. Roxy wanted to ask him something more, but Fate cuts her off, saying it's none of her business. They part ways, and Mugen suddenly praises the protagonist for how he fought Lady Roxy. They talk about how someone had been controlling the chimeras earlier. Mugen says he was surprised to see a monster being the core of those beasts, and reveals that his family studied the lost Galian technology, so he knows much about it. Hearing his daughter is an excellent scholar, the protagonist suggests she examine the chimera, but Mugen believes he's only saying that to meet his daughter and tries to hit him. In another scene, Rain is working and discovers Raphael is studying the Philosopher's Stone. She quickly looks through her books for information about it. Rain realizes the stone grants immense power but takes control of the owner's body and mind. She and her companion wonder what Raphael is planning. The scene shifts to the protagonist at dawn, thinking about Mine's words, how she suggested he attempt Domain E, the power level of the celestial dragon, which is extremely difficult to achieve. In the present, Fate wonders how he will accomplish that when suddenly an alarm rings throughout the city. Northern informs Roxy that a massive stampede is heading toward the city. Roxy orders her troops to intercept the enemy while civilians take shelter. Fate sees it's a march of death and how Roxy leads the army to face it. Although he believes she can handle it, he enters semi-starvation mode just in case. Avarice then tells him something is coming from the east toward the army. Using his special eye, Fate sees underground something like a whale quickly approaching. Knowing its attack would endanger Roxy, he tells Avarice he knows what must be done. They fire, forcing the beast to surface, revealing it also bears an emblem. Fate quickly attacks, determined to find out what's happening. Using his skills, he discovers it's a crowned beast of level 440, a formidable opponent. Even Avarice believes that not even a holy knight could win, so Fate switches to shield mode to block its acid rain. Avarice warns that if the beast touches him, he will probably die. Analyzing the situation, Fate shoots a flaming arrow to try to evaporate it, but the enemy evades by splitting in half and hiding underground again. Fate sees it heading toward the army, so he tries to stop it but is ambushed by more of the beast's spawn. He quickly defeats them and hurries to find the monster's core, using an untested attack that Avarice calls insane. Even so, they manage to hit the target, stealing its soul, but the beast still stands. Suddenly, Fate notices someone above him who seems to be controlling the beast, a masked figure identical to him. He wonders if it's Eris, and rushes toward the figure, but Avarice warns him his opponent has a sin weapon. Realizing it's likely Eris, Fate charges, but slimes protect her. They then discover why those creatures never die even when struck directly. They split infinitely. Avarice warns his master that because of this, the slime will be a formidable foe. During the battle, the slime engulfs Fate, allowing him to destroy it from the inside. Avarice tells him not to overdo it with his gluttony, because if his stats suddenly spike, he could overload. Fate says he intends to defeat Eris first, but his attacks fail to harm her. Avarice tells him to check his stats, and Fate realizes he has reached the limits of a human. The sword explains that someone with domain E would be immune to normal attacks. Even so, Fate angrily attacks again, with the same results. His opponent tells him he's wasting his time, revealing it's not Eris. During the fight, Fate is overwhelmed because his foe is far stronger than Eris. He decides to attempt Domain E, even if it costs him his life. Achieving it, his opponent is shocked by the enormous power he gains. The enemy tries to flee, but Fate cunningly unmasks him, revealing Northern. Northern uses a flute to summon the celestial dragon, which heads straight for Roxy. Fate tries to stop him, but Northern attacks, sending more slimes at him. Realizing he won't make it in time, Fate panics. Elsewhere, the army is terrified as the celestial dragon approaches. Mugan orders his companions to find shelter, while Roxy prays for strength from her father, determined to face the beast. But at the first strike, she's paralyzed, forcing Fate to save her. He uses all his strength to block the dragon's attacks, shattering his mask in the process. Lady Roxy, seeing the protagonist's face, is stunned. Turning to her, Fate simply says, "It's been a long time." Avarice immediately congratulates the protagonist for having forced the secret shield technique, saying it was amazing. After greeting Roxy, she is shocked to see his eyes, but Fate quickly asks her to step back while she still can. Deeply ashamed, Fate apologizes for deceiving her all this time and thanks her for everything she did for him. Roxy, seeing him walk away toward the celestial dragon, begins to cry, worried for her friend. But Fate is determined to finish his task, telling Avarice that he's counting on him for this. After trapping the celestial dragon, they realize the beast can still attack. Northern admits he's surprised to see Fate immobilize the celestial dragon and then launches his attack, trying to pressure the protagonist into losing control. Fate worries because the technique he used earlier should have lowered his stats, but it didn't. His rival explains that there are 3 reasons. First, forcing himself to reach Domain E exhausted him. Second, he's using part of his strength to maintain the technique. And lastly, Northern confesses he's not even fighting seriously. The protagonist ignores him and continues attacking, following Avarice's advice not to distance himself from Northern. But his rival notes that Fate is attacking recklessly and realizes that if he moves too far from the dragon, he'll lose control of his technique. Hearing this, Fate panics, giving Northern the chance to wound him and cut off his arm. Northern then prepares to kill Fate for causing him such suffering. However, Fate suddenly impales him with his sword, having previously used illusion magic to lower his guard. Northern, shocked, asks if he really sacrificed his arm to do this. Fate confirms it was all or nothing, and then cuts him in half, killing him. When doing so, Fate is transported inside Haniel's core, where he meets the girl again. She introduces herself as Luna and thanks him for killing her, saying it was for the best. But she also apologizes for no longer being able to stop the fate awaiting him. The ground begins to crumble, and Fate realizes she had been the one containing his gluttony. Luna confirms it, regretting that she can no longer do so, because if he devours the celestial dragon, he will lose control of himself. As Fate is about to fall into the void, Avarice, in her human form, saves him, demanding they quickly return to the battle. Before leaving, Fate thanks Luna for warning him about his destiny, but still assures her he will kill the dragon. Together with Avarice, he returns to the battlefield and prepares to finish the celestial dragon, which suddenly breaks free of his trap. Fate knows he must end it quickly before his energy runs out. He throws his sword at the beast's face and then punches it with his fists. Avarice complains about being used as a thrown weapon, but Fate tells him not to worry. He then uses the appraisal skill to check the celestial dragon's stats. He discovers the dragon has higher stats than him, and Avarice warns him not to get overconfident just because he's using Domain E. Nevertheless, Fate leaps onto the beast, cutting off its limbs one by one. The celestial dragon counters, but Fate ignores the danger and kills it anyway. After finishing the enemy, his gluttony begins consuming him, and he struggles to resist. Before becoming a threat, he considers unlocking a new level of avarice to reset his stats, so that if he loses control, the danger will be minimal. He then collapses, unconscious. Later, Mine approaches Fate, who begs her to kill him. She scolds him because she warned him this would happen and prepares to fulfill her promise. But before she can strike, Roxy saves Fate and demands to know what she intended to do. Fate feels ashamed for being seen like this and avoids eye contact, but Roxy starts crying, asking if he thought she would hate him for telling the truth. She tearfully tells him that no matter his power, he will always be her fae, and begs him not to take his own life. Suddenly, Fate feels his gluttony calming down, which is strange. Roxy then asks him to return to Babylon with her. Fate is shocked that she still accepts him despite knowing the truth, and, overcome with emotion, collapses onto her lap, completely drained of energy. The scene changes to Fate waking up, not knowing where he is. He tries to move his arm, only to remember Northern had cut it off, wondering how long he had been asleep. Suddenly, Eris and Mine burst into the room. She tells him not to worry about it, then returns Avarice to him, who scolds Fate for forgetting and abandoning him. Eris explains they went to Central Galia to find him because a monster had carried him away after Mine left him behind. She apologizes, saying she was busy dealing with Envy, Northern's weapon, since it would be disastrous if it found another master like him. Shocked, Fate asks what was going on, and Mine explains Northern was being controlled, that Envy, the black cannon sword, was actually the one in command. This surprises everyone, even Avarice, who didn't know Envy had mind control abilities. Fate asks if they destroyed it, but Mine tells him these weapons are indestructible, so she decided to throw it to the farthest side of Galia. Eris then tells Fate that after showing his power, she now needs his help. She explains she has abandoned the plan to kill Roxy, as that was Envy's idea, and promises to stay away from her. She says that with the celestial dragon dead, the country is entering a new era and they will need his help, along with all the other sin-bearers. Fate agrees to help, and Eris mentions they should first deal with his arm, as there's a chance it can be restored. However, she urges him to leave before Roxy returns, as staying near her is dangerous, his gluttony stirred just from fleeing at the sound of her name. Later, Roxy leaves the barracks to visit Fate, which irritates Miria. On her way, Lady Roxy buys grapes for Fate, but upon arriving at his room, she finds he's not there. Instead, he left a letter apologizing for disappearing so suddenly. He apologizes for not telling her about his gluttony skill and thanks her once again for always helping him. He promises that even though he must leave now, one day he will return to her side. After reading the letter, she understands his reasons and accepts his decision, remembering the first time she met him and how he learned what it meant to be a holy knight thanks to her. In the present, she resolves to grow stronger for when they meet again. The scene shifts to the Veric family, discussing how Cadaver was actually Fate. Rafal remains indifferent until he reaches his research area, where he thanks our main character for killing Hado, who was blinded by his ambition to find the Philosopher's Stone. Meanwhile, Fate uses Avarice to regenerate his arm and then heads toward the capital to meet his companions, but not before fighting many slimes in Galia to earn money and keep Avarice happy.